The stock market is now in its longest losing streak since August as prices fell for the fourth straight day. In today's video, we're going to cover why the market's falling, what to know, and where the action is at right now. Nvidia will report earnings tomorrow, and it is going to be big.
Early on this morning, the S&P 500 and the SPY continued its downwards move, and we started to see that opening drop play out once again. But in the middle of the day, we did actually start to see a couple of good pops to the upside. Trump did say that Saudi Arabia agreed to invest $600 billion in the U.S., and we ended up getting a nice intraday leg back to the upside ahead of Nvidia's earnings tomorrow. If you want to end up reading more about that Trump situation with Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of info there to be read, but either way, it ended up moving the market in the middle of the day there. Of course, though, one of the biggest things that traders are worried about right now is Nvidia, right? Whenever we talk about Nvidia, there's been a lot of fear in the stock market lately because of AI and valuations. A lot of people are worried that these companies are spending way too much money, and it's been really hitting the market here. Like we showed, the S&P 500 is heading for its fourth day of declines, the longest losing streak since late August. That's a pretty big deal here, and it's all coming ahead of the big dog tomorrow in after hours, Nvidia, which is going to be reporting crucial earnings here. Now, of course, Mike, Nvidia really needs to reinsure investors that these lofty valuations are warranted. Otherwise, the stock market could be in for even more declines.
Oh yeah, so basically, as we look at Nvidia and their earnings, let's look at what happened with their last few earnings reports. We can see with their most recent one on August 27th, it was a wild one. We can see they sold off pretty hard right after they reported earnings. They ended up popping up a bit the next day, but that uptrend didn't really last too long. And then when we go on to their second most recent earnings release, which happened on May 28th of 2025, it was good, but the stock gave back a lot of its gains shortly afterwards. It ended up recovering a bit the following days, but it was definitely choppy. And then if we go to the third most recent earnings released by Nvidia on February 26th of 2025, again, pretty choppy, where they had a big move up at first, but those gains did not hold, and the stock actually sold off pretty hard in the days after.
It definitely did, and we're starting to see this pattern of a whiplash starting to come off of that first initial move. Like if we go to the most recent earnings move here, the stock initially dipped to the downside, but over the next trading day, it actually chopped around and ended up coming back in a pretty awesome way. Of course, it ended up continuing that downward slide as time went forward, but that next initial day was very hard to trade, and I think that something that we really need to focus on in the short term is the following day's move. I don't think I would try to necessarily play the earnings before we end up seeing what happens at the report, especially with everything going on and all of the mixed earnings that we've seen already this season. I mean, some tech stocks have flown up, and then others like Meta have gotten destroyed. So I'm going to keep this in mind for tomorrow. I really want to see a good directional move, and then I want to see that direction really continue. Of course, whenever you start to look at these moves, though, you get these nice up moves, and then the next day the stock falls. That could really hurt traders that try to run into calls, blindly at open.
Exactly. Yes, there's been a great AI boom, but we're definitely seeing a shift now, and 2 out of the 3 most recent Nvidia earnings reports resulted in downwards price action. Tom, when we look at Nvidia right now, what are you seeing on the charts, and what are the key levels to pay attention to heading into this earnings release?
Yeah, so Nvidia is really straddling a very key range of support. If we actually go to an hourly chart and we start to zoom out a bit, we can see Nvidia's went crazy lately. They actually flew up to 212, but ultimately over the past few weeks, as we've started to see things decline, Nvidia has started to straddle a very critical range of support right between the 176.50 point and 180 mark. We've seen multiple bounces within this zone with Nvidia over the past few weeks and even the past couple months. So if we end up breaking under this zone and falling to the downside, I think that it's going to really start to freak traders out as we start to see that support start to give. Now, a lot of traders are like, okay, Tom, well, let's just say that we bounce off support. What are some big levels overhead? I really like 190 being the first big resistance, and then secondary 195 will be pretty critical as well before we get back to that key $200 level. That was a big level to break back below, and ever since Nvidia broke below there, it's failed to reclaim that spot. So really reclaiming 200 will be critical for the bulls, but if we end up breaking under this range, there is another major range to the downside here where Nvidia has bounced multiple times right around 168 to 172. It's about a 4-point zone, but either way, it'll be just under the zone that Nvidia is straddling now. And again, that's going to be a very critical of support if this ends up giving out.
Definitely. So NVIDIA is set to report earnings 20 minutes after close tomorrow, so keep that in mind. And one thing to certainly keep in mind is that NVIDIA's move is going to have a big impact on the market as a whole, because not only is it the biggest company in the world, but it's also the heaviest component of the S&P 500. It's more important than Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and any other stock out there. And basically, Wall Street has grown increasingly concerned that AI isn't generating enough revenue or profits yet to justify this massive spending on AI infrastructure, which is what NVIDIA provides. So, this pullback is showing reduced risk-taking by investors with stocks, crypto, and basically everything else. So as we look at the market right now, Tom, SPY has been weakening. We're on the longest down streak since August. What levels are on your radar for tomorrow?
I thought that today, the way that the SPY reacted right in this red zone of resistance, right around 663 to 665, was very critical. I would say the upper end of that zone, closer to 665, is going to be the main resistance that I am really watching for tomorrow. If the SPY can break above its high of day from today and start to rip, it'll also start to rip through a trend line that's been holding up over the past couple days, where SPY started trending down yesterday. So I will be watching this trend very closely to see if SPY can end up breaking up and through that, and if we start to get a good run back towards that key 670 resistance, maybe even 668. Ultimately, though, we've been sliding off the past few trading days and the past few weeks, and we actually got below a pretty critical support today around 664. We've talked about this level a lot. It actually bounced at the end of day yesterday with the SPY, but ended up coming back a bit. That's going to be a big area of resistance for the next few trading days, so just keep that in mind. As long as the SPY continues on this downward slide, I think that we can continue to see good pressure down, and it's really creating good opportunities for puts and also good opportunities for things that follow volatility, like UVXY, for example. We can see UVXY had some pretty insane intraday swings today, so keep your eyes on that. But ultimately, the SPY is at some critical levels right now, and if we really break that low of day from today, that's where I want to see a real breakdown occur.
Yeah, volatility brings opportunity, and we are certainly seeing an increase in volatility now, which is a great thing. And of course, a lot of the opportunity has been more on the downside lately. But of course, when we do see market pullbacks, it brings some of the biggest up moves that we ever see as well. For example, back during the April Liberation Day tariff crash, yes, it was a bloody time in the market, but that is actually when we saw some of the biggest up days that the stock market has literally ever seen. I know the current environment is far different than what we saw back then, at least for now. But speaking of dip buying activity, we do have some good news for all the dip buyers out there. We normally see a good second half to November, and this uptrend normally picks up right around that 20 to 21 day mark. So we're a couple days out from a historical average increase.
Exactly. And I got to say, though, that, so far November has been pretty rough. So I'm not going to say that, the stock market has to follow this exact trend here. And obviously, Nvidia earnings are going to play a big role on the overall market tomorrow, along with many other things that we're still going to talk about throughout the video. But it is good to see that the second half of November is historically pretty strong. And, looking at these stats here, the second and first half of November are generally pretty good. And the second half happens to be the sixth strongest half of a month out of the entire year. So really, this is a pretty good time of the year. Again, though, it hasn't been playing out that way this year.
Exactly. But talking more about some of the important action in the market in the short term, of course, NVIDIA earnings are like the event of the week, but we also have some other stuff going on as well. What's on the schedule?
Tomorrow, we actually have FOMC minutes coming out, which could actually be a pretty big deal for the stock market, given that the Federal Reserve is kind of up in the air on whether or not they're going to cut rates at the December meeting. So it'll be interesting to hear what they talked about at their last meeting. Nonetheless, though, I think everybody's really worried about the non-farm payrolls that are scheduled to come out on Thursday. Analysts are saying that it's unlikely that the unemployment rate does release, but it does seem like that the non-farm payrolls will be coming out. So be ready at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. This could help provide a glimmering, shining light on the jobs market, right? Because people have been in the dark for a long time. So we really need to get some data flowing, and ultimately that could move the market quite a bit.
Yep, yeah, the effects from the government shutdown are still lasting on the market. So let's keep this close on watch. But besides that, Tom, let's get into the fun stuff, which are some setups and predictions. A stock that is definitely on my radar is still SNDK to the downside. I know we've been pretty bearish on this one in the short term, and it has been working out very well. As we look at SNDK, it fell by around 8% today on a close over close basis, but it was actually down much more, especially after that opening drop. The stock is still very overextended in a broader sense, and I do think that there is a good chance that this stock can pull back a lot more, maybe even closer to that like $200 to $210 area. But there is a big risk here. When we look at SNDK, this stock still, in a broad sense, has a lot of euphoria to it. I know it has been weakening, but it's still up quite a bit. And because NVIDIA is about to report earnings tomorrow, if they just report amazing earnings and renew more like euphoria and hype, especially in the AI industry, that can send this stock higher. That is the biggest risk for this setup. If NVIDIA crushes earnings or has any good news to say on that front, this stock can pop. Keep that in mind. But besides that, it's still on my bearish radar.
Yeah, and if NVIDIA does end up coming out with a negative report and then SNDK starts to fall under like critical 230 support from the past couple days, I think the downside move could really continue. And I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday and, the past few days, of course, but I thought the way in which SNDK ripped back up and started to fill that gap before falling was a pretty good confirmation back to the downside. So I will be watching it extremely closely as well and waiting for support to give out tomorrow. But with my first setup, I'm looking at Tesla to the downside here. What I'm really watching for tomorrow is for Tesla to really solidify a move underneath $400, which it straddled right around the end of the day today. And I would love to see the low of day from today start to give out closer to 394. So if we see that downwards move under 400 and we ultimately see that 394 area start to give out, watch for Tesla to the downside for a scalp. I do think that there could be some selling pressure in the middle of the day tomorrow before NVIDIA's earnings as investors become a bit fearful. Of course, that could go the opposite way as well. If it does, we'll have to adapt, but I will be watching for that downwards opportunity and that recent low to break.
Sounds good. Another stock that is also still on my radar is LRCX, and it's to the downside. This is another one that we've been talking about quite a bit lately, and it's just been working out very well. So it's still in play. There was a recent $1.5 million big money trade on it. As we can see on the screen here, the stock is continuing to weaken. There's more downside bearish momentum, and it's really hard to critique it too much. Again, I know we've been talking about it a lot lately, but the trend is still intact, and it's still on my bearish radar.
Yeah, that was a really good drop by LRCX. Once again today, the trend is continuing, and even at the low of day again today, it started testing that at close. So we could end up seeing that give out again tomorrow. That was a pretty weak close, if I must say so. But with my next stock, I'm looking at AMD, Advanced Money Destroyer, at least in the short term, to the downside. It's down 4.25% today, and we talked about this one yesterday, actually. And what we did is we looked at the Bookmap because there was a lot of buyers stacked up at 235, and it created a really big buy wall and earlier on this morning, we noticed that that buy wall started to give out, and AMD ended up flushing under that in a fantastic way for a 10-point move all the way down to 225. And guess what was at 225? A huge buy wall again. So for tomorrow, I will be watching for that 225 buy wall to give out. I got to give a lot of credit to Bookmap on this one. That was a perfect level to break down today, and AMD was one of the best moves at open this morning. The options were going insane. So shout out to everybody that caught that one. Shout out to Bookmap as well. If you want access, check out the link in the description down below. You can look at pretty much any stock you want on any given day. So it'll be very helpful with support and resistance and even a ton of other cool features. But talking about AMD just a bit more, we can see just how critical this support range is that it straddled today. So I really want to see a good confirmation. It's held this multiple times the past few weeks.
Sounds good. All right, well, let's jump right into today's momentum plays then. And with the first one, we have Big Bear AI, ticker symbol BBAI, to the upside.
Big Bear had a pretty decent move today. If they can end up breaking out up and above $6.20, then watch it to the upside.
All right, with the next one, we have Rigetti, ticker symbol RGTI, also to the upside.
Yeah, Rigetti had a pretty decent move today as well. A lot of growth stocks came back, but if they're able to break above $25.90 at their high of day and double top, then watch them up as well.
And then with the last one, we have Affirm, ticker symbol AFRM, to the downside.
Pretty weak close with AFRM here. If they break under $65 even, right around their low of the day, then watch them to the downside.
All right, so we have these three stocks on the radar for potential continuations if and only if they break through the levels listed. These stocks are volatile, so you need to protect yourself. Whether you trade one of these three stocks or anything else, focus on making smart, long-term oriented trading decisions. If you need help with that, check out the Key Lessons channel in the StockedUp Discord. It is completely free. And besides that, let's jump right into today's $420,000 big money trade, and we are looking at none other than HIMS, ticker symbol HIMS. Today, the trader here bought the 37 strike call options for January 16th of 2026. I'm sure many people have heard of HIMS before. It's been a pretty hot growth stock over the past year, but it has pulled back quite a bit over the past few weeks and months. Basically, HIMS is to the point where it could potentially be overextended to the downside. These call options are very close to the money. They have around 50 days worth of time to them, and the trader here is positioning themselves to benefit off of this recent dip and the stock popping higher. Looking at this setup, the stock definitely has been selling off quite a bit over the past few weeks. It is uptrending in a broader sense. It's not the biggest big money trade we've ever seen, but I can see how it can end up working well if we don't see the market just continue to freak out. Like if we see Nvidia earnings hold strong and maybe some dip buyers come into play, I think HIMS can do pretty well. But at the same time, like especially if we see that lower level of support break right around like 35.50 or so, or maybe even a little bit past that, it might be worth cutting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a pretty short-term play as well, going out to January 16th. I really like that zone of support that you mentioned around $35. If we actually go back to around this time last year, December of 2024, we can see that there was some pretty critical resistance there. So that's definitely going to be a big support zone. At the same time, I also noticed that HIMS is getting pretty close to a big trend line that it's been following the past few years. So I will definitely be watching that one as well. It's very close to it. It's on support, like you said. If it ends up breaking through there, I think you could cut it, and it makes for a pretty decent like risk reward scenario here. You know, if we cut just under that zone, like let's say around 33.50 or so, and we target even just like 47 to the upside, that puts the risk reward right around 4. So I think that's a pretty good risk reward if you ask me. You could even extend your stop out in that case a little bit, or even make your target a little bit less to maybe make it a trade that would work out more often. But nonetheless, pretty nice setup here by HIMS. The main thing is this downtrend going to keep continuing? If it does, don't be afraid to cut.
Exactly. So either way, we will keep it close on watch. If you are new to the channel, welcome, and definitely consider obliterating that subscribe button. Every single day, it takes us a long time to basically cover everything you need to know about the stock market, whether it be big money trades, SPY levels and analysis, upcoming events, important earnings, historical stats, and so much more. We cover it all every single day, and if you subscribe, you'll get our videos recommended to you more often, so definitely consider doing that. And let's also give a giant shout out to today's member of the day, Elite, in the Stocked Up Discord, who had a great post today showing some awesome gains, and he also had a great post yesterday as well with a lot of kind words. Huge shout out to you, Elite. Thank you so much for all the kind words, and keep up the great growth going forward. It is awesome to see profits like these. If you guys are into short-term trading, definitely check out that first link in the description and the comments down below to get in on the Stocked Up trading floor. You get full access to our army of custom trading bots, daily access to our big money plays, weekly live events. You can chat with Tom and myself all day long and access basically everything you can need and more for short-term trading. You can save quite a bit with coupon code BIGMONEY as well, so definitely check that out. But besides that, thank you all so much for watching, and let's crush it in the market tomorrow.